My talk is modern identity management. This is not precisely a Python topic or indeed any programming language topic. It's something agnostic and it's more related about security and how we handle our users and how we permit that they make login or their information. So, wait. It's not working, doesn't matter. Okay. So I will start that, why security matters, and what makes that many software developers or the developer industry is not taking care about security. And if you don't believe that that is true, that security, anyone take care about that, maybe those statistics will change your mind. This is the first one. This is the statistics about only United States. And we in Latin America don't have any regulation institute that have those things, but just in 2019, in the first 6 months, we increased in a 54% the data branches that we are having in our systems related with last year in 2018. And just to this 54% increasing on the first 6 months of this year, we have reported 3,800 data branches just in these first 6 months. And of those 3,800 data branches, just for 8 of those data branches represent around 3.2 billion information exposed just in United States. So imagine what we can show if we have a regulation in Latin America, for example. So I don't know if you know this company, Equifax. Yes, one guy is laughing, another one here. Well, maybe here in Latin America, we don't know much Equifax because it's a consumer credit reporting agency that works with United States, Canada, and UK. And well, against they received a big cybersecurity attack in 2017 and happened at the same time with the problem with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. So I have some numbers for show you. So they say in the official information that the hackers upload to their system 38,000 driver license and 3,200 password details to their system. So this is fake information introduced in their system. But in the opposite, they have stolen some information. So the official reports say that we're around 146.6 million names and dates of birth, and around 145.5 million social security numbers. And then we have 99 million address information, and finally we have 209,000 credit card information. So it's number and expiration dates. So imagine how many stall of a person they can do and create fake people that use other things. So we have in United States a lot of in that movies that someone have an identity stolen. Another one is using that identity, or someone stole the information on their credit card and are using that. And it's thanks to that. So Equifax is like an example of the worst situation that we can have with any security. There I have a friend that is making a consulting to them at least in the level of database because they was not masking any information in the database. So the hackers arrived to the database and found all the information, any encryption, any name, any password, any direction, any credit card. Same update of privacy policies last year in May. All of us. It's like, oh my God, I have an account in this place. I will close that, yeah. This was for the GDPR. So the GDPR is a new regulation in the European Union that establishes some data protection laws. And if a software company or something is not filling these regulations, they will pay fees. So for example, Equifax, it was in time of the GDPR, they will need to pay a big fee to the European Union for don't protect the information to their people. So what is, we are in Latin America, right? So why we need to take care about that? It is because we develop software, and sometimes we develop software for European Union. So, or we can have users of European Union using our system. So we need to fill those regulations in our systems too. And finally, I will say that, but security is a team effort. So as usually, I listen in things like, no, security is responsibility to the security expert of the company. But we have a security expert in our company. I have a security expert in my team. Maybe not. And sometimes when we have a security expert, the expert is not that person that will implement all the security aspects. It's just the person that will establish what things we need to incorporate in our systems, and we, in our part of the job, we need to make that part. So it's just a guide to what we will do. So it doesn't matter if we are making backend, if we are making front-end, or we are making mobile apps, or we are the guy of infrastructure. So every level of a system need to have a security. So this is the agenda for this talk. So this just is like why we need to take about security. So we will talk about the REST API designs. I will talk to you about OAuth if you never listening about that, and then we will talk about JWTs, JSON Web Tokens, and we will talk about the user credentials problem that we have, not only with our users, if not on the part of us as developers. Then we have the identity management. Where is identity management, and where is identity and access management? And I will show you some questions that we need to make before to start a project for have a really successful identity management project. And finally, we have the identity as a service. So my name is Mercedes Wyss. I am from Guatemala. I am community leader there, not precisely from Python, but yeah, I have a more like agnostic community, Devs Plus 502, and I have a JDuchess chapter that are the female chapters from Java. I also was member of Guatemala Java Users Group, and actually I am a CTO and a startup based in Guatemala that is called Productivity, and I am part of two awareness programs for developers that are the Oracle Groundbreakers and Auth0 Ambassador. So I will start with this of the bad API design. And if you don't believe, but I always show that someone laugh, then I talk with someone, I say, yes, I saw many systems that. But we have many REST APIs that request, in every single request, we send the username and the password for see which one is the user that is trying to access that information, and for make a kind of authorization process. So but basically, we are making always a login. This is an inconvenience because first, we cannot ask a user introduce the username and the password in each request, right? This is something not likely for our users. So what we do is save the credentials in the client. And the truth is that the only ones that need to know these credentials is the user and the place when we are saving those credentials. Anyone else need to know those credentials. And one of the problems are that we save in an unsafe way the credentials in the client. So for example, like I save that in the cookies and anyone can inspect the cookies and watch that. Or what happens if I don't secure properly my REST APIs? I am not using any SSL or TLS certification for make HTTPS connections. Or in that I am using HTTPS, but I am sending all the information as parameters in a GET point. So we are doing that wrong. Anyone monitoring Open Wi-Fi network can watch this information traveling in the network. So what we have is we have OAuth, we have other formats, standards like OpenID or SAM, but I will show you OAuth that is the most popular for use. So what we have here is a new actor that is the OAuth server. So the OAuth server also can be in our resource servers, but are like different entities. So we have a client app that will make the login process with our OAuth server. So they will request a token when are making the login, the authentication process. So they send their credentials, the OAuth server validate those credentials and create a token and return this token to the client app. And now the client app will save this token instead to save the credentials. And in every single request that we are making to the resource servers, I will say this token. And the resource server will establish a communication with the OAuth server for validating if this is a valid token and was not violated or corrupted in the way. It really represents the person that is saying, and we will also validate that that entity have access to the information that one from the resource server. So everything is correct, so the resource server will return to the client app the information that is requiring. If not, they will send something like, we're sorry, your session expired, and you need to make login again, or this is a process that we cannot make. So commonly now we are using JWTs for implement those tokens, but you can create your own thing of token. One interesting part of this is that the fact to use tokens doesn't mean that now I will put the username and the password in those tokens. Again, this is a wrong approach. So JWT basically is an open standard that was created around 2014. The guys that created JWTs think of use the same power that we have with JSONs, but use the JSONs in an encryption way. So this is a picture of how we look at token. The token has a header, has a claims. So in the header we have established established information important about how we are creating this token, and in the claims we are sending the information that we want. But one of the problems that we have just with the JWTs is I can take the JWT, I put that in a website or something and see the content that have a JWT and modify the JWT. So what we do is combine that with a JSON web signature and use an algorithm for create an encryption. So the people can always watch the information in the JWT, but if they modify, that will not match with the signature, and we will know that this is not something properly created or the token was violated. So here we have now JWT with the signature. So we have the headers, the claim, and the signature. Now we will explore this token, and we are watching here the header that we have the algorithm used for create encryption of this, and the type that is JWT. This is show it here because exists other approaches in this standard, are like 6 or 8. And then we have in the claims, and finally we are watching how was created the signature. So explore a little bit this, we can show this claim, the sub. For example, this is a special claim for identified which entity in our system represent this token. So basically it's the user, but it's not the username. We need to create a special identifier for that username. Other one are these scopes. This is not part of the registered claims. Not was a claim created that we can use sometimes for make more easy the validation for authorization process. So here I will establish the permissions that had my user, or I can send the token and verify in the database which permissions has my user. Finally, I will make here a comment. This is the type that always is JWT when we are managing JWT. But we have other standards. And other of the problems that we have is that maybe I am making, for example, the backend and the front end with Python. But I am making mobile applications, and this is making with other programming languages or other kind, for example, an IoT project. And we are using different libraries for different programming language in each one of those projects. So some libraries decided ignore this claim, the type, because always is JWT. So when I validate if this is a valid or not valid token, will say me that it's not just because have the JWT claim or not. So we need to choose a library that handle that in the same way, or I can configure that, ignore it, or add it. So this is a list of the registered claims that we have. I will explain a few ones. We have this JTI. For example, I can have permanent open sessions like we handle in Facebook. But one of the things is that, okay, I will use always the same token per 6 months, for example, or I will renew these tokens each time that was used. One of the things here is that if someone could steal my token and my token never expired and I never renew that one, they can use that for a hack our system or make other direct requests to our API. So we can use JTI for establish it as a specific identification to the token, for don't save all the token in the database. So I can use each token just one time and renew after a usage in the application, in the client side. The next one is the sub that I was saying to you, that is for establishes who entity is represented by JWT in the system. Then we have the is, that is for establishes who created this token in all my system. Was one of my clients, was my backend, or was in other part. The next one is the X for established the expiration in a numeric value. So if I will have sessions that are opened permanently, for example, like in bank implementations, that if I don't make nothing in some time, I need to close my session, or they will not process any other requests that I am making for the system, and this is subject for security. If you can see, for example, we can use mobile applications of the bank in the cell phone. So what happened is someone stole me the cell phone since when I am making a transaction there. So obviously the stoler cannot use my cell phone in the first minutes. So when they can open that and solve the bank application, we can do nothing. The next thing is what other problems solve JWT. So we can solve authentication, authorization, but we can also implement federated identity or make information exchange between two parts. That works when people say, We will use HTTPS, but we want to send the information to also encrypted, and we can use that. We can use that too for client-side sessions. This is when, for example, when I have an e-commerce application and I use saving the cookies, all the things that the user is buying, for example, the products that they are adding to this carrito compras, el shopping cart. Thank you. Okay, then we have the client-side secrets. So of course we are talking about JWTs for make the authentication and authorization process. If someone is confused about the authentication and the authorization process, I will explain this again. So authorization process is when I am making the login. So I am sending my credentials to the server and obtaining a token. But the authorization process is all the things that I make after a login. So when I am trying to access information, so I am sending this token, and this token will be validated for permit to me, give me an authorization for use this resource. And if you want to investigate more about JWTs, I suggest to you this jwt.io website, and also read this good handbook, have examples to have to use for make this authentication and authorization process, or how implement an identity federation, or how to use in client-side sessions. So I have take pictures, but at the end of the presentation, I have these slides in GitHub, so all of you have access to those ones. So now we are improving the design to our REST APIs, right? So instead to stay sending a username and a password, now we will use a token. The next thing is the user credentials problem, right? And this is not only the user's credentials problem, it's a problem to an entire development industry that is continue using the same approach, make a single signing on. And how we will lie is the problem of developers too. It's like, which power do you use in the system, QWERTY? Right, admin. So it's not only the users. The first problem is that we also are continue using just single signing on. And then when it's well documented, the awareness of this implementation. And in that recent surveys that we are making the industry about security is that now users are more worried about that someone stole their information in the web, that someone entered to their house for stole them. So yeah, it's like critical. And the problem is the passwords, right? It's not only that users don't use good passwords, that they use the same password for everything, and now sell some kind of directory, physical directories, when we can put which website and which password we are using because we cannot remember all the passwords. And the other problem is that developers are not saving password in the correct way in their databases. So in every data branch, those passwords are being exposed. So what are making the development industries? Like, we need to force users to create ultra secure passwords, and they are creating rules. And this is again a fake thing, because happen things like that one, right? This system is requiring to this grandpa a uppercase, a number, and a special character. And what is creating here? Password 123 exclamation, right? And this is match the rules, but are not a secure password. So we increase the level of the rules. And if you don't know English, yeah, they are asking here also la pluma de un águila, la sangre de un unicornio y un jeroglífico, ¿no? Aparte de todo lo demás. So happen things like that one in the websites, you know? I have a website that I never try to make login because always is this fucking story. So I got directly to the recovery password and I put wherever and I may access. Right? So it's not good. It's a bad experience for our users. And we need to take in mind that sometimes, and many of the time, the first thing that our user use of our system, the first thing that they saw is the login. And if the login is a fucking headache, they will not return to our systems, except that they are forced about that. So what we can do? So we need to improve that, and we need to think in the users at other things. One of the first problems that we are having in nowadays is that developers don't have the conscience to our users have an entire life cycle in our system. The other thing is that we are working with legacy system with modern systems. So we have, for example, in the banks happened that we have the websites of the banks that were for a long time ago, and then became the era of mobile applications. So the banks need to create mobile applications. But what they do is, here in Mexico, for example, I was talking in Mexico City, they say, I have in this bank one credentials for the website, but I have other credentials for the mobile application. So are two different users for access the same information in supposedly the same platform. So we need to take to our users our entities that access to one system. They need to create the same system of users for access the website and the mobile application. So we need identity management is handle those users as entities. The other thing is that we need to separate the users that are making access to the system to the actors that we have inside the system, that have information in the system that other can watch. One example of that could be, again, the banks, but in a corporation account. So I have for example, Pemex is the name of the cemetery, right? Pemex is a big company. So it's not the owner of Pemex, the guy that is paying the salaries, right? They have some counters, and they have access to some Pemex corporated accounts. So the counters are only users of the bank system for access this Pemex account and can pay the salaries. But they are not an actors of the system, like Pemex. Pemex, in this case, is really an actor of the system. Then we have, for example, personal accounts. When we are a user, but we also are an actor, because I am an entity inside the bank, I have accounts in a bank, a record, a credit record inside the bank. So we can be only users or actors and users on only actors. So identity management is responsible to separate these things. And the first thing is provisioning, is create an entity of the real world, assign an identity inside our system for can be a user of the system. And we need to take in mind other thing, is that in nowadays, we not only have users or human beings accessing to systems. So I know that we can have robots, we can have IoT project or voice UI interfaces accessing a system. So we need to separate that. The next thing is the account management. And this is the most critical part, because who really sit for ask which encryptions we will use for encrypt unless the password? Or which sensitive information we are requiring to those users that we need to encrypt, or how I will make for anonymization of information, for make that someone enter to my system and can hack that system, this entity, they cannot know that one. For example, one strategy is that if I will save dates of birth, I will change the year, and I will put plus 5 years. So when someone enters to the system, we will the name of Juan, but will be a different date of birth. So then programmatically, I will reduce the 5 years for know the real born of birth. So this is for that. Then we have identity governance, is this part I will explain you with the bank system. So it's not only about have roles in one system, if not, it's about this user can be working in different systems. This is other problem that happens sometimes in companies, for example, in big companies. So we put in the developer system, team, I need to make a system for sellers, but then I need to make a system for the guys that make the route for put the things in with the clients. And then it's the same person, but they have a different user for the seller system or for the truck systems. This is a problem. Need to be the same system for all the employees, for they don't have different credentials. They need to stay remembering that. Then we have the identity and access management. And here is how we establish those identities that I create in an identity management with access to my system. And we have also other things, that is the authentication, authorization, and identity federation. Here in identity federation, I will explain you before. Well, the easy one is authorization. So this is when I send a token, I review if this is a valid token, and then I know if they have access or not to those resources. Then we have the Identity Federation. So how many of you recognize those logos? At least Facebook and Messenger, right? So we have here Katana, Facebook Lite, Orca, Messenger Lite. We have pages, we have event, analytics, and I don't know about pictures. We have the F8, that is the big event of Facebook. So what have in common all these applications is that I can make login with the same credentials. And also, if I am logging, for example, only in the Messenger in my mobile application and I don't log after a Facebook Katana or Facebook Lite, I don't need to make login again, right? If the cell phone just recognizes that I am logging in the Facebook, in one of all those applications, and they permit to make me login. This is a federation identity. So it's permit use the same credentials for make login in many systems. Also, how many of you make a register or a login in other website different to Facebook with Facebook login? Yeah, don't say no because it's like we say, oh my God, thanks God, Facebook. Yes, I don't need to create a new password. So these websites or these systems are using the Identity Federation from Facebook. So what happened is like, a long time ago, that discontinuity happened, but it's a different approach. So imagine that we have in domain name 1 Katana, and then we have Orca in domain 2. So if I make a login in Katana, and then I go to Orca, Orca forced to me make login because they cannot have access to the cookies that have Katana with the login. So the developer industry say we need to create something for create that two related domains can access the same cookies for don't force to the people, made the login into different websites that are related. So this is what when I start this of the identity provider or a token security. That is what we know in the OAuth server. So we end with something more complicated. Now we have a third server that we handle the authentication for all those related domains, right? Katana and Orca. So in this case, in identity and access management, we are talking about that we will implement this auth server for our systems. So for example, in the bank, I will create an auth server for handle the login for the website that is a legacy implementation and for the mobile application that is something more modern. But I am using the same user and the same password. So for our user it's easiest, and in that for us it's easy handle just one single database of users. So this is what we know for make login with others implementations. Then we have authentication. And here for sure we know the single signing on, but we have other options for permit to users make login. So the first thing that they say, we need to improve the single signing on. So we need to permit to users make with something that they know, that is the password, but we also need to require to them something that they have or something that they are. So we can make a single signing on, introduce a token, make face recognition, or use the fingerprint. And this is what we know now like multi-factor authenticator. So we have other ones, like two-step verification. For example, in Google, we can use, with Gmail, this of the, they send, we make the login, and then we receive a code in our cell phone with SMS. And this is other application that is called Guardian. There is. So I make login in the website. On the website, we create a QR code, and then I will use Guardian in my cell phone for scan this QR code and give access to this website to me. So I have access. And then I need to go again to Guardian and allow permission to this website. So finally, I will can go inside that. So are more steps. But how many of you forgot close your Facebook in the university lab? Yes. So you will not admit that, but someone laughed, right? What happened when someone forgot close his Facebook in the university lab? It's like, oh my God, then they found a lot of things. It's like, I am dating with someone else, and they publish porno there, right? Wherever, yeah. So what happened with the website? You can go walk in and say, oh, damn it, I forgot close my session. And you take Guardian and say, I will deny permission to that website. So anyone that was doing something bad for you can do nothing more because was denied the access with Guardian. So maybe are more steps, but we have more options. Then we have biometrics options. Sounds like, we can make iris recognition, we can make voice recognition, and we can incorporate that to our applications with Twilio. We have typing recognitions. In nowadays, some cell phones say, you are not the owner to this cell phone because they detect that you are not writing them. And we can make a DNA usage, like Edna Moda. Okay, we'll continue. Then we have passwordless. Passwordless, in some ways, really is don't use password. But in some cases, we need that a password exists. So this is a small example of a company that they want to the employees can access to this application faster when they are in some place, for example, the office. So are verifying first the IP. If it's an IP registered in the system, and second, they are using geofences for see if they are in the office or in their home, if they make work at home. And if not, they are requiring a multi-factor authentication. Then we have the Touch ID, that is for the fingerprint. And something that we need to know is the fingerprint are uniques. In that when we can broke them, but are uniques. So what they are doing here is reading the fingerprint, and they are verifying if that user exists in the system. If the user don't exist, they create the user. If not, they are generating the token, and finally we are inside the system. Then we have the SMS codes. So in SMS codes, it's a little bit complicated because we need the user created a password before, because not always we can receive an SMS or not always is working. So I need to make the login. And then we have the magic link. So how many of you log into the Slack application? Yeah. Slack is the perfect example for magic link, at least for mobile applications, because in the web or in the desktop, they require to you introduce the password. But they send a link to you, and you are in of the system. So then we have many social federated identities, not only Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and LinkedIn. So I will show you just pictures to all those. Then we have some enterprise, and this is interesting, legal federated identity. So this is a Nordic banks, right? It's the Nordic guys. These guys are so advanced. So I think that I have reduced time, so I will skip the part of questions for can finish this one. But the next thing is the first problem is don't believe that this is and cycle inside our system. So what happened when we start a project? I never listening to in a Scrum Master is we will make a case and a story about how to handle users. That don't exist. It's you copy the other implementation that we have from users in this new system. This is what we do, and this is run-made. We need to make some questions. And the first question is how we will create those users. So I will require that make registration, and I will permit to someone else that they create the users in the system, and we will send a email, a password, this is your email, or we will send an email that's saying you have an invitation to create an account in this system. The other thing is that I am migrating, or I am creating a new system for migrate a legacy application, because that means to all my users exist in other place. So I need to migrate, I need to synchronize those users to my system. And here happened one problem is those passwords to all those users are encrypted in some database. I will have access to the algorithms of encryptions for created those passwords, or we will need to send an email to all the users saying you need to restore your password for access the new system. Then we will the username uniqueness. It not always is just the email address. So for example, I have my Gmail account, and I create my LinkedIn with that Gmail account. But I can access to some systems and create an account with my Gmail account, another with my LinkedIn account. And in both cases are the same email address, but I different, right? The Gmail and are the federated identity for LinkedIn. So they are not using a uniqueness, my email address. So maybe we can make that they create an identifier, or we create a random one. The next thing is how users will make login. So I need to think in terms I need single signing on, I can offer other options, or which options I will use to them. So not always we can use Facebook at federated identity for make login, especially when are formal things. I don't have more time for show you some examples. Then what devices will be used? So I will use only websites, or I will use mobile devices, or we use other kind of technology. And the next things that we need to take here for security is how I will handle like a login to which users are being used. For example, in WhatsApp, I can have a register of all the browsers that I will use it, in which IP address. And in that, since WhatsApp, I can close some sessions that I have open in other web browsers. So I am offer that options to my people, or saying, you know, we detect a new login from an iPhone, and you always are using Android, so it is you, really you, have money now? Yes. Then is single signing on needed, or I can skip that? Then is multi-factor authentication needed? So maybe it's more secure, but I really need to make to my users make 2 steps for make the login. The next one is what should be happen when the user make login out? For example, in banks, it's important to have registered when they make login out, and in that when we only close the browser, they say then to us, you know, your last session was not closed properly, and we will close that session. Then is how will browser configuration influence in sessions? And here we are talking about cookies. You know, I use some websites that they save everything in cookies, but if I not make a logout session, for example, if my computer make and then I try to log in the same website, I cannot do that. They always say, run authentication process, And it's because those cookies are out of date, we never clean that, I never make a logout, and I know that I need to make right-click and clean the cookies only to that website, but a user will not know that, and they will cannot use again our system. The next time is session timeouts. So I need to have a session timeout. How many times we have this session timeout? Maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We need to sit and have consideration about the information that we are handling inside our system for define that. Then we have the provisioning. What happened when it's over? And this is when a user decider erase his account from our system. So we need to take this in terms of legal things. Because maybe in our system, they can do something that is not legally. I will put maybe a critical example. For example, in Facebook are being really, really famous for detect some illegal things. So people record videos and then upload those videos to Facebook that we are installing these things. It's like, okay, maybe they only want to erase the video, or, okay, I will say that I skip the questions. And I have just small. So Facebook really can't permit that they erase their account with all the videos that are evidence to someone that they do, maybe not, right? We need to establish that in depth with the laws of every country when our application will work. Next is password reset. You know, some websites or systems don't have any option for we can reset our password. So if we forgot the password, we cannot enter anyone again. Then we have how we'll block users, like make Netflix or Spotify. If I don't pay in 1 or 2 months, they block my account. The next one is anomaly detection, and this is related to the devices or the IP address. It's detect that is not the user, the one that is accessing. And then we have privacy or compliance requirements. So your system have a privacy policy? Yeah? No? Right? No. We need to create privacy policy about how we will use the information to the users. Audit logs. Yeah, we have logs, right? And we print that. I will print the request of the user. We print to the login one with the username and the password. And anyone with access to the logs can do that. And then we need to consider how the information will change over the time. So maybe time by time, I need to require to the users that they make an information actualization. So, and finally, you can make all this using Identity as a Services. You don't need to implement that by zero. And all the clouds have Identity as a Services. And finally, I will show you this. So this is the GitHub repository for you have the slides. And this is my fan page, but here you don't use that. So this is my Twitter. And thank you for coming.